That your microphones are turned on.
I think it is. I think it's John. Oh, she's here. Ask you. I forget it. It's a cute kind of name, like Junebug or something.
All right, good evening. Today is a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. It is Monday, June 26, 2023. Before we begin our regular legislative meeting, we do have individual committee meetings this evening, and we will start with City Properties, Parks, and Recreation with Mr. J.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Parks and Property meeting June 26, 2023 at 6:04. Council members are present, including myself as chair, Mr. Heidi, Mrs. Fry, and other council members and guests are noted. We have one request legislation. Two, I'm sorry. The first one is a letter from Don Patterson, Director of Barberton Parks and Recreation, requesting legislation to enter a park contract with DWA Recreation in the amount of $129,810.84 to replace the play structure at College Park. Emergency wording requested. Any remarks or questions? Ms. Thompson?
I had a question. Can you remind me what the date would be to replace that?
6 months from.
6 months? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns?
Chair.
Mr. Greer?
Just want to see if there's any news on if the dollar amount was affected by the hold, or
From what I heard, no.
I had looked at things.
so we're just,
Yeah, same amount. I haven't heard nothing changing.
thank you.
All right. Mrs. Fry?
I was just gonna make a motion to call for it.
Yes, ma'am. And Mrs. Fry, motion. Can I get a second?
I will second that.
All right. And vote, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. A letter from Stacy Carr requesting legislation allowing the mayor into contract to sell various city properties that have been identified for market rate residential development, emergency reporting, and one we requested. Did everybody get that list? Any questions, concerns? We do have a planning director here if there's any questions. Right?
I just wanted to know if, they're all RS 40 or 50, which means residential, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Those are the standard lot sizes for most of the city.
Okay, thank you.
All right, awesome. Seeing any other questions?
Chair.
Mr. Greer?
Thank you. This question is for the planning director as well. Are the current properties part of one of the phases that we're doing, or is this just a random
Yes.
list?
This is part of an initial phase one, which had been laid out by the former planning director. We kind of identified these as kind of the low-hanging fruit properties. I think that we didn't need to hold on to for future larger scale developments. So it's kind of a little bit of a trial run as well, just to kind of gauge what the interest is for the infill development.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? All right, can I get a motion for this, please?
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
And vote, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We have a couple pending legislations, and we'll all for the sales of the parkland. Any questions, concerns on any of those three? Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that though I'm not against selling the parks or putting them on the ballot to be sold, I do believe that there should be a plan in place first. So I will not be supporting this.
Any other questions or remarks, statements? All right. Open this up to miscellaneous discussion for city properties and parks. Anybody out in the audience? Any motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make that motion.
I wanted to say
Oh, I'm
something.
sorry.
I think everyone in the room got a letter from Tom Harnden from Parks and Recreation today that he was planning to come and he couldn't, but he did lay out the facts about the Planning Commission wanting to go not wanting to sell any of these parks at this point. Some of it, I beg your pardon?
You said planning. It's
Oh, okay.
Parks Commission.
Parks Commission, I'm sorry, misspoke. But as Mrs. Thompson said, we should have a plan in place before we do anything with any of this property.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Heidi?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, with everybody saying we should have a plan and that this was all caught off guard, just had to make a couple notes here that November 24th, 2020 was in the print media and online of the Beacon Journal. Barberton City Council and City Administration pitched ideas to raise revenue and cut costs that included a look at selling some of the city's parks. Then we also have a quote from Mayor Judge: "We want to make sure people being mobile these days that parks are utilized as much as possible. We have quite a big park planned. We'll see where this conversation goes in the future." That was 2.5 years ago. When's the future? Did we just go by the wayside? I mean, this is literally 2.5 years ago, and the conversation hasn't happened. What was that, 30-some months? So, when it's off guard, this was 2.5 years prior to me introducing this, that it was even in the print media. Then I know, Councilor Fry, you get the newspaper, and I read the same things you do. I just do it online, and I don't get the paper, but I used to. But at what point are we just going to buckle down and say it's time for the conversation?
I just want to bring up a point. You're saying 2.5 years. We did have COVID. Let's not forget that.
This is the end of 2020.
But we've had all this goings on with the ARPA money and what to do with that, and it can be used for parks. And Mr. Wursler also said in relation to College Park that they have some CDBG funds that they could use to make the park better. I think it's wrong to say that we haven't discussed it, and we haven't. Not even one mention, not even from you saying, when are we going to talk about selling parks? Because we have all these other projects going on, and as with the road programs, with the grants and so on and so forth, those have been on the books for years and years and years, and they're just coming to fruition. We haven't even had a discussion about the parks yet, and I think that should entail everyone in this room talking about it at a Parks Commission meeting, since they are the ones who would have the say-so about whether or not we sell a park or do something different with it, lease it or whatever. So I get your point that it was a few years ago, several years ago, but that could be said about a number of projects that we're working on. And, you know, everything takes time. But we haven't had that conversation yet to say which ones we're interested in selling, what are the possibilities for any of the parks. So respectfully, I just want to say that.
I was basically going to say that. However, we've talked about this literally into the ground over and over and over again, and I think we're all very clear on how each person feels at this point about it. I get what you're saying, but yes, I in 2020 was a different person than I am in 2023. Same probably goes for every person in this room. Same goes for the state of the world, so there's nothing left for me, so.
Ms. Thompson?
I was just gonna agree with Mrs. Fry. I think there needs to be some sort of collaboration between the Parks Commission and Council. Sounds like they're already talking about that, they were talking about Harder Park and possible plans, but like I said, I just think there needs to be a plan in place first.
Mayor?
Yes, so since I made the comment, we have talked about selling parks, and we have talked about reutilizing our parks, and what's the best way to go with our parks since that comment, and since the pandemic. And you may say, well, the pandemic was a while ago, but the state of emergency was just lifted the other month. That was federally, statewide, countywide, and here locally, so we just got out of the pandemic, but it's still lingering. We still have bi-weekly calls with the county and the health department, so it's still kind of lingering. So we have had conversations internally. What was everyone supposed to do during the pandemic? Go outside. So we've seen this kind of, I don't know if resurgence is the right word, but more activity in our parks. We've seen more younger people move into the city, and we've had an increase in the number of youth playing youth sports, and we like them to utilize our parks. So we're still having those conversations, and parks don't have to be as the way we knew them when we grew up. They can be utilized in other ways. One thing we've been trying to do is make the parks kind of open for everybody. And if you've been around for a few years pre-pandemic, you saw the concerts that we had in the parks. And all I heard from people older than kids' age saying, hey, I live across the street from the park, but I haven't been here in years because I don't have kids anymore. Well, they should be for adults too. And also what's kind of slowed some things, we've had a number of department heads who have changed over the last few years. So planning director, CBO, service director, a number of employees at the mid-level manager level, so there's a lot going on. But we've had those conversations about our parks, and we'll continue to have those. In College Park in particular, I have been working on a plan, have not released it because I'm still getting cost estimates and different things like that. But wanted to address the comment that was read that I had made back in 2020, because we are still working on our parks and discussing the future of them.
Mr. Griffin?
I think everyone here knows how I feel. Section 6.3B of the city charter places the power to control, equip, and manage city parks with the Parks Commission. They recommend that this does not sell. Has anyone talked to the neighbors other than me? Mr. Jaber has.
I have.
You have. Everyone wants the park. Has there been a neighborhood meeting about it? Parks? No. Has there been an idea what we're going to do with it later? No. So I asked you that a couple of weeks ago. Why? Nobody has an answer for me. So I'm never going to support this. Too many people want it, and it wasn't done right from the start.
Ms. Marie?
Hello. Probably didn't want to see my face today. I just have one question. My name is Marie. Everybody should know who I am by now. First of all, why the sale of College Park? It's a kid's park. And because you're selling College Park, I, right now, am having the events in my yard. I'm going to leave this for everybody. Please come. It's Saturday from 2 to 6. Because there's no equipment in College Park for the kids to play. It burnt down. You got money for it to rebuild, to restore, to put it back together, and now all of a sudden you want to sell it. So you're throwing the kids back out on the street. You know, give them something to do. I'm not going to take all of my equipment to the park because there's nothing there for them to do. My pools are in my yard. The volleyball nets are all set up in my yard. I am praying that the city will, on the city property, bring me some picnic tables. If not, we got lawn chairs. But I am so against, I will fight till the end to save College Park, in any park. I mean, everybody's older here. Maybe you don't go, but you got grandkids, you got nieces, you got nephews. If you don't give them something better to do, then they're going to go to the streets. And we can see every day on the news what's happening on the streets. Nieces, nephews, neighbors, kids getting shot, getting killed, you being robbed. If you don't change the mindset of these kids right now, yes, they're little. If you don't change their mindset, then where are they going to go? Okay, so this is a fighting battle that I am willing to stand and I am willing to fight. I am with Mr. Griffin I'm not for a sale. And if I have to walk all day and all night to get votes, to save that park, if I have to go to the government and tell them that the city of Barberton got money and they want to put it somewhere else instead of putting it back where it belongs, I will do that. I'll do it, I'll fight, and I'll fight. Because our kids need better than that. Summer Park, I ran into 6 kids in the plaza, riding their bikes. They almost knocked the lady over, coming out of the Dollar Tree, and I asked them, what are you guys doing? Why are you here? There's nothing else for us to do. So I suggested the library. 15, 16-year-olds right now, okay, give them something to do. Go to the library. Go to the park. Play basketball. Play volleyball. Play kickball. They don't know how to do it because nobody wants to show them. I'm willing to show them. I'm willing to stand up. I'm willing to fight. And I know I got some backers. So I'm going to present this to everybody. It is free Saturday from 2 to 6. 395 South Van Buren Avenue, Barberton. My house. My house. So that's it. I'm sorry.
Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Chair.
I'm so pissed trying to sell the park.
I just want to make one last comment because it's getting twisted a lot in the wrong ways. The ballot language requested would simply give an option. It would authorize a mayor with city council's approval. The two branches would have to work together. The mayor has stated he has a plan for College Park. If this plan is a good plan and it's implemented, if this went to the ballot and passed, it doesn't require us to sell anything. If this plan that the mayor puts into place is valuable and works, it could be a park forever. In 30 years, if it doesn't work and it collapses, we would have that option to possibly move forward. This is not a requirement to sell if it passes. This could sit there as a park forever. But it would be up to the administration and the council to both agree to move on from it. If the plan for College Park makes it an attractive park and makes it something great, then we can look at each other and say, we're not selling this park because we don't have to. Nowhere in the legislation request, in the ballot language, if passed, would sit there and say, Mayor, you must find somebody to buy this park. It doesn't say, councilors, you must find somebody to buy this park. But in 30 years, if something bad happens, that park crumbles, and we need to move on, then we already have that option. I'm not sitting here today saying we have to sell it as soon as it passes. I'm saying let's get the option on the table that if something goes south with these three parks, that we can move forward. But if we've come up with a plan to make, hell, even Harder Park, if the mayor and the Parks Commission come up with a great use for Harder Park, we don't have to sell it if it passes. Nothing is requiring us to. So when people sit there and say, we're trying to sell the park, that's not the case. We're getting the option, if this were to pass, that if there's a plan, it stays as a park. If the mayor says, I want to sell it to this person, and we as a council look around and say, we don't like this idea, and we shoot it down, guess what? It doesn't sell. If we look at the mayor and say, I got somebody who wants to buy this, and the mayor happens to know that person, knows he does shoddy work with everything he does, he can say, I'm not selling it, and it's still a park. But we're not putting something on the ballot. We're not sitting here saying we're going to sell it. We're not putting it on the ballot saying we're going to sell it. This would move it to the ballot to give us the option, and I look at the long picture, 25, 30 years from now, if the infrastructure crumbles there, if we deem that it's no longer worth it, if Harder Park comes underwater and we say we have to make a giant retention pond out of the damn thing, then we have the option to do it. But to sit here and everybody sit there and say, sell, 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 how come nobody but me says option? That's all I'm saying.
Thanks, sir. Bailey? Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Hyde, I think the mayor said he had a plan to do something with College Park before, am I correct, before you brought this up to sale? Okay. I'm still looking for the why from you, and I haven't got my answer. And you talk about 10 or 20 years from now, we can address it in 10 years from now. Why we gotta address it now? Why should someone vote? Why should, say if I lived in Ward 654 or whatever, why should I vote on what happens in Ward 3 of the neighborhood park that wouldn't affect me or my children?
Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, that's how the charter reads with how the ballot would work. But the why is, as I said, to give us an option for the future.
Yeah.
Ms. Baylor?
Last week, you were willing to retract this.
Yes.
Was that not
Sure.
discussed, or I'm sorry, 2 weeks ago? Was that not brought and asked you if you felt comfortable retracting this? And you said, no, I want to,
No.
was that not a discussion?
No.
Sure.
So now, okay, well, let me speak.
Can I, it wasn't a retraction, it was, I would go with the suspension so we could vote. I was not retracting.
Ms. Marie?
I'm not walking. If the city of Barberton wants to sell property, you have an overgrown property in Copley on the corner of Hametown Road that's been there for several years. You didn't think I knew about it, but it's there. It's overgrown. It's overgrown. You got deers and mice and rats rolling all through the yard. Why not sell that property? Why sell something that's already established? The only reason College Park looks the way it does now is because two youth decided to burn it down. But the ground is still there. The playground area is still there. And it may look like a sore eye to you, but if you put it back the way it was, give the kids back their equipment, and it's not a sore eye. It's not a sore eye.
Thank you. We'll be voting on this tonight, so this way we can squash it and move on to other things. And hopefully we can see how the council members will vote. All right, I will open this up for Ms. Lane's discussion. Anybody else? Ms. Lane? We did have an email sent through council, and also we had two city employees ask me about, union and city employees, about the cannon through parks and planning. Mr. Pete, was there any information about the cannon being concrete poured on the city property? I had a couple city employees ask me why I was done without going through planning commission, I'm sorry.
It was not brought to my attention, it did not go before the planning commission.
So does it have to go through Parks and Planning Commission that hasn't been poured in the city properties?
Per the charter, it should have gone to planning commission for a recommendation.
So now through, what happens now, just so I can answer the city employees that asked me to ask this question tonight.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing?
So we received a public records request for information regarding how the concrete pad was placed at Lake Anna. These fans are loud, I'm sorry. We received a records request regarding how the concrete pad where the cannon is resting at Lake Anna occurred. And that was at the time where I understood that a plan was presented to the Parks Commission in February of this year. And that was the first time I had found out about that. And so that did occur to the Parks Commission in February.
And we're all supportive of the VFW, they do so much for the community, but still we gotta follow the charter rules and through parks and planning. So when the city employees asked me, I was also didn't know the answer either. So I'm asking Pete, so does this allow anybody to just go pour where they want to do at the park without permission, or how does this work?
No, it should have gone before the planning commission, for the planning commission to make a formal recommendation.
So whose fault is that for not checking up on that, or requesting paperwork, or getting permits and stuff?
I don't know where it got lost. It was not brought to my attention that this was intended to occur, so I didn't have the knowledge to even bring it before the planning commission. I wasn't made aware until after the concrete had been poured.
Again, it just makes us look bad as city council members that we did not know what was going on. Now they're asking for me, Sean, we're union guys, we take care of the parks, we're cutting the grass, why they pouring concrete without permission? We're going over the union without permission.
Those employees should really reach out to their managers.
Okay?
And if the managers don't have the answers, they should reach out to their managers so that communication can be spread to them.
Now, will they get a fine, or, did they pour that out so they get it retested?
No, it's been inspected since then, and it was done appropriately.
Appropriately without permission or permits, correct?
The concrete was put in the way it should have been put in from a construction standpoint.
Without permits and without permission?
Yeah, I don't believe there would have been a permit with permission on our property.
That part was confirmed by the building department that no matter who would have poured, irrespective of the planning commission's approval or irrespective of the planning commission's approval, in terms of building permits, that would not have been required under the building permit requirements.
Correct.
Correct. So that portion was followed appropriately, I guess, that it did not require a building permit.
Yes, Ms. Beal.
Are you saying that the city employees wanted to pour the concrete, or what are they saying that affected them?
They're union employees, and they're upset that it was done without permission or permits through the Parks Commission, Planning Commission.
Right, but I mean, like, what work as union employees would they have done on that?
With the concrete.
Is what I'm asking.
That's the question I'm asking Pete.
Oh.
I think that's Dr. Shreve.
Mr. Greer?
Thank you, Chair. At this point, this is relatively new information for a lot of people. Is it fair, this is questions for the mayor and legal and everybody involved in the administration, is it fair to say that there was an issue acknowledged and is being looked at, and what repercussions there would be, and how to ensure that this wouldn't happen again? Is it fair to say that it's still
I can
almost
tell you,
under-
I just got the documentation maybe 24 hours ago.
Yeah, now I've not had a chance to talk to Laura about this.
And yeah, I know it's relatively new to a lot of us are hearing this, so I just wanted to make, it's not final, like,
Again,
we're still moving towards a solution and repercussions and figuring out what happened and how to prevent.
Thank you.
I can understand if the union would have a complaint if it affected a job that they could have done, which is why you can't go into the parks with mechanical equipment and help clean up. But as far as I know, I don't think there's a department that pours concrete within the city. Does the street?
I mean, we have several departments that pour concrete, but there's always this if and or but situation. So we don't have a lot of forms, different size forms. So there's some concrete we can pour and some we can't. I think we used to do a lot more back in the day, so I'm not sure if we have the forms that would have been used to pour this.
I know they haven't been pouring curbs for a very long time.
We do not spend city funds on that as well.
Exactly, I was going to point that out. This was done as a gift, so to speak, from the VFW.
Yes, and we appreciate that, but no charters were followed, or the ordinance was not followed. I mean, personally, myself, I had to pour a new sidewalk in front of my rental property. I had to pull out a building permit to get that sidewalk fixed. And again, I didn't mind, it was a $50 fee, I paid it. But again, the union employees, I will let them talk to their bosses and their managers asked me to ask you guys tonight, council, why this was allowed without going through Parks and Planning Commission and voted on. Because it should have been voted on through the Planning Commission, correct? Through a charter?
I don't know if we would have taken a vote or not, but recommendation.
It should be a recommendation or presented in front of them. Again, we appreciate the VFW, to support them, but also as our councilman, the 2 employees that reach out to me, all have them reach out to the manager of their department and go from there. Thank you.
I'd like to say that the company that poured the concrete did it free, completely free. Maybe they missed the step, but they paid for the concrete, they paid to do it right. They had to move the cannon in a certain amount of time to be able to make sure that it was brought back to the lake. And they did it basically in one weekend. And I'm sure not one of those people that volunteered their time intended to take one union job. Not one.
And we respect that, we appreciate that. But again, our concern from the 2 employees said they're just, very disappointed it didn't go through planning or parks like it should have. Other ordinances, or charters, like example
Did
does.
go through Parks
But it
Commission.
didn't go through planning. And through charter, you have to go through parks and planning. And any new business, if they want to pour concrete or they want to build an addition, you have to go through steps. And steps were missed. And hopefully we can learn from this. I mean, it's too late now, the job is done. But like Mr. Greer said, hopefully we can learn from this and move on. Any other miscellaneous discussion? Thank you, Mrs. Miller. All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry.
I will second that.
All right, sir, and we are adjourned at 6:36. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety, Mrs. Fry.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. President. It is Monday, June 26th. The time is 6:37. I am bringing the Public Welfare and Safety Committee to order. All members of the committee are present, and that is myself as chair, Mr. Griffin as a committee member, and Mrs. Coburn as a committee member. All council people are here with the exception of Mrs. Angeloff and guests as noted on my sheet. We have no new requests for legislation. However, we do have one piece of pending legislation, ordinance number 84, 2023. This will be voted on tonight. It is to enter into contract with U.S. Royce Protection Service, an ordinance authorizing the Barberton Municipal Court to enter into contract with U.S. Royce Protection Service, formerly known as Tenable Protective, for a period of 1 year to provide unarmed uniformed security officers and declaring an emergency. And everyone received a copy of the contract as well as the rates that are going to be paid for regular hours and holiday hours. Are there any other questions at this point? Anyone from the gallery? Okay. Now I'll open up for miscellaneous discussion if anybody has anything they'd like to discuss about public welfare and safety. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, could we get, who hands out the parking tickets for if somebody's parked on the street sweeper night?
Police department?
Okay. Could we somehow get, and just to show that there aren't favorites, I did forget last night and I got ticketed. So they do issue them regardless of who you are. But could we get them new ones? Because I notice here to pay these fines, it says the court's open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and on Saturday, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. There anybody over there I can pay right now?
Yeah, we had that issue come up one day. Can't remember what the explanation was after the clerk of courts. I'll have to get back to you. That came up, I want to say a year ago. I don't, maybe a few months ago. I'd have to look back.
Because if we left here at 7 o'clock tonight, pretty sure they locked the doors behind us. But yes, they, didn't we just talk about this last week, that the street sweeper, you can't park even if it's out of operation, you can't park? Didn't we just say that?
Yeah.
And look who forgets.
You should be paid double.
Well, it goes up after 3 days.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin and seconded by Mrs. Coburn, and we are adjourned at 6:40. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. Next up, Rules Marketing Development, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to call this meeting to order today, June 26th. We're in council chambers. All members are present except Mrs. Angelo, who's absent from council. Tonight, we have one request for legislation. We have a request from Stacy Carr to approve the fiscal year 2023 CDBG Annual Action Plan. This is something that we do on a regular basis, yearly, and the plan is attached to all our paperwork, and it was very long. So if you had a chance to read it, you would know that it's just a plan to do these things. So do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything, including council or gallery, for miscellaneous about anything else?
Chair.
For rules? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out, as we're all aware, a year ago, we were dinged with giving the money back for this. And I didn't necessarily know this, but just wanted to point this out, that we did get all that money back. Everything is good to go. We're all back online, and everything was straightened out. So it was just a hiccup. We learned from it, and everything's a go again.
Got the money back.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do you have anything else for rules? I have something to say.
This concerns these city codes that they come up with in this group here. I think the whole deal with city code is completely out of control now. I mean, I don't understand how you guys can pass these codes and the people don't know anything about them, and where you come up with the dollar amounts that you're gonna, rip people off for violating the code when they don't even know anything about the codes. How do you do that?
He's talking about the property. He got fined for not cutting grass. One of his home.
That's not
Different
rules.
committees.
That's been resolved.
Resolved? Okay.
Yeah, that's been resolved, but still, it's unreasonable. $800 to cut somebody's, you can get anybody to cut for 20 or 40 bucks? You wanna charge somebody $800?
Sir, could you
One time.
could you-
One time.
could
Yeah,
you
we're-
state your name and address?
What's that?
Could you state your name and address?
Yeah, my name's Edward Rappucci. The address that we were talking about, that issue's been resolved, but I still wanna know how you guys come up with this $800 fee for cutting somebody's grass.
Right.
I just wanted to say that normally you're notified that your grass has to be cut within so many days. They tag your lawn. And if you don't do it within so many days, they come out and they do it. And
That's not my question.
the rate is based on, that was your question. The rate is based on how many people they send out, how much they
I'll
charge
do
you
it
for the
40 bucks.
hour.
You just send it to me and I'll cut everybody's grass that you find that they need to be cut for 40 bucks. This is ridiculous.
But did you get a notice saying that you were to cut your grass?
No, my grass didn't need to be cut. We're talking about your devil strip, and that was cut. They cut my flowers. They put a notice on my door and cut my flowers.
Did they give you a notice before they cut the grass?
Not the grass, they cut my flowers. The grass was cut. They didn't violate me for weeds or grass. They violated me because I had flowers around the tree.
Well, how do you know that you were violated? Did you get a letter in the
I
mail?
got the notice on the window. They should never have put on there. My grass was cut. Anyways, that's been resolved. That's not the issue. I want to know why you guys come up with $800.
Because if you look around town, you will see that there are so many people that do not cut it, no matter what we do. Therefore, in
That's
our
unreasonable.
ordinances,
That's unreasonable. I'm
well, they
telling
won't
you.
even do it for $40, sir. So, you know, this is the way it works, and it works that way in most communities.
Well, let me tell you something. I've been here all my life, and it's never been a problem except for the last few years. I don't have a problem cutting your grass. That's your grass in the medium strip and the double strip. I don't have a problem. All property owners take care of that without you guys trying to force them to do something that they do ordinarily. And then you try to tack on a fine on top of that because, you know, somebody comes along and says, oh, well, I found one weed or two weeds or this or that, and you're gonna charge them $800? That's unreasonable. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Very unreasonable. If you cut somebody's whole lawn, and that's still unreasonable.
I understand what you're saying, but we have a real problem in this city, and you should bring your letter in to the mayor's office, and you can talk to him about how that's determined. But I cannot believe that they just, with all the lawns that we have to do, that somebody just showed up at your door and cut your
Believe me, it's already
grass.
been resolved because
Mrs. Miller, you have something to say?
I'm just curious, is this your home that you live in that you're concerned about?
yeah, I'm concerned about my property, yes.
Right, the home you live in,
Yes.
or is this your business?
No.
These aren't your rental properties?
No.
Because you own several rental properties.
That's true.
Okay.
And the grass is cut on all those rental properties too. Anyways, that's one of my complaints. The other complaint is, how do you guys come up with attaching fines and jail sentences to these ordinances when it's not reasonable that you would do that without contacting the owners of the property, discussing with them? We just send out a notice, hey, you're gonna be fined and you're gonna go, you're gonna have jail sentence attached to it. How do you do that? Where do you get the right to do that?
Sir, these are ordinances, laws that were established within the city, and as I said, you get a notice saying that you are to comply with something. As far as the jail sentences, I don't know anybody that's gone to jail, but it might say that in the letter, if you don't comply, that you could end up in jail.
Yeah, first there's fines and then there's jail sentences.
Right.
I mean, those are threats, and I don't appreciate that at all. I mean, I've lived here all my life, and I've talked to the people in the building department many times about situations that somebody complains about. First of all, the complaints are driven by other people in the neighborhood, not by the city itself. Now the city's taking it upon themselves to be the complainant, and I don't understand that at all. Where does that come from?
The mayor had his hand up.
The mayor had his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, it's unreasonable that people don't maintain their properties. It's unreasonable that people pay taxes on their income that comes to the city, yet for us to mow parks and public land, yet people don't maintain their properties, so now we have to spend taxpayer dollars to mow irresponsible people's yards. There's a cost to that. So it's the number of people, it's the equipment that's out there.
Wait a minute, take one person to mow any lawn. You don't need a number of people and use machinery when all you need is a lawnmower.
Well, and that's very subjective, that's your opinion, okay? So we don't.
Well, I cut grass all the time, yeah, that is my
I've cut
opinion.
grass since I was 10, okay? We're in the same boat, I guess. So we don't put a big tractor out in the yard. Use a lawnmower, weed whacker, things that make sense. We don't put a lawnmower on a park. So we want to de-incentivize, because we don't want to mow your grass.
I understand that.
They want
That's
people to
perfect.
take care of their own properties. Unfortunately, they don't. So that's where the city is forced to come in, because if you don't cut the grass, you could have the mites, and you could have mice, and you could have all these things as things deteriorate. Then people look to the city to be the one in charge to go tell people to mow their grass and maintain their property. So that's the place we're in. So everything has been done legally, everything was been done in a public setting, like tonight. So you are more than welcome to come every Monday night, unless there's 5 Mondays in a month, to come, because we don't meet on that day. You can come and voice your opinion on anything. Everything is done here. When there's a print media, that was reported in the paper. It's on social media, it's live streamed right now, so there's multiple ways. I believe the minutes are also put in council chamber, or council clerk's office and the post office still, library?
Post office, library, Leeches on the west side. Right outside this door is one spot, and currently we put them at Giant Eagle, and we are looking for a different spot on that in the town, but they're posted in 5 public spots.
The other thing I have to say about all these ordinances, any ordinances you guys come up with should be put up for the vote of the people to either say yay or nay. You guys just take it upon yourselves to make up these ordinances and force them on the people without their say-so. And that's not right. It's supposed to be a democracy. You're supposed to put it before the people to see if they agree with it or don't agree with it, regardless of what you guys think. And that's what I'm really upset about. I think anything that you guys come to take money out of my pocket or determine that I'm doing something wrong, and you make an ordinance for it, it needs to be put for the vote of the people. Put it on the ballot. Let the people vote on it. Then that's democracy.
Sir, I think we're out of time here. We have to continue.
I'm done.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr.
Do we
President.
have anything, Mr. President?
Thank you, Chair. Just as a wrap-up, if we could get his name and address after, if he sticks around, just to make sure he's pointed in the right direction, so he can actually get answers. Appreciate the concerns and the input, but the answers are not going to come from this body right this second. So we definitely have, we'll get them in order. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, hearing anything? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I will second that.
We're adjourned at
6:51.
6:51. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next up is City Utilities with Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call to order City Utilities, June 26, 2023. We're in council chambers. All members of the committee are here. That's myself as chairman, Carol Fry, and Erica Bailey. All others are noted on my chart. We have no request for legislation. We do have pending legislation to enter into contract CT Consultants, Brentwood Package Plant, Elimination Study, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a professional engineering service contract with CT Consultants for additional construction, administration, construction inspection, and environmental assistance support services not to exceed $118,700 and declaring an emergency. We've had discussion on why we are having this. It was the overrun in time during the pandemic, the property sold, and we had to do some extra steps. Our second piece of legislation is presented by myself and Mr. Heidick, appropriation Utilities Department, an ordinance appropriating $348,158.67 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the stormwater capital budget and declaring an emergency. Anyone have any miscellaneous for utilities? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:55.
Thank you, Mr. Coble. Last but not least, Finance Personnel, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance and Personnel, it is 6:54, Monday, June 26th, 2023. We are in council chambers. The committee is present, which consists of Councilors Coburn, Thompson, President Gray, and myself as chair. All others noted. This is a legislative night, so we do not call for any new things. On my agenda, it says presentation and approval of the financial report, but we did, right, that's for next week, so we have the pending ordinance, 86-2023, appropriation Utilities Department, an ordinance appropriating $348,158.67 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the stormwater capital budget and declaring an emergency. Any comments? 87-2023, appropriation Fire Department, an ordinance appropriating $4,753.59 from the unappropriated item of the general fund to the fire department's operation and maintenance budget of the general fund and declaring an emergency. Any comments here? 88-2023, appropriation Parks Department, an ordinance appropriating $2,593.08 from the unappropriated item of the beautification fund to the Parks Department operation and maintenance fund budget and declaring an emergency. Any comments here? All right, is there any miscellaneous discussion from the committee? From the body? From the gallery? No, seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion, sorry.
I'll second.
Thank you, and we are adjourned at 6:56.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. That concludes our individual committee meetings for this evening. We're going to take a 5-minute break and resume the regular legislative meeting for this evening. Thank you.
What were they having, a party out there?
I don't know.
They didn't invite us?
They're deciding not to run probably after this shit show.
Did you see the two people?
Water for 1 week.
And stuff to drink water for.
All packs are doing that stack now. It's seriously. All packs are doing it.
$9.06 I paid at your place. $6 at Mark's.
I got
All right. Good evening, everybody. Council, just ensure your microphones are turned on. All right, this is a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. Today is Monday, June 26, 2023. I call this meeting to order at 7:07 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Mr. Griffin.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us bow our heads. We meet to serve. We meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well to represent all members of our community fairly. To make decisions that promote the common good, we recognize our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Please protect our men and women in our armed service wherever they may be. Watch over our first responders and all our safety forces. Give them wisdom to do their job professionally. We ask this in your blessed name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Clerk, please call the roll.
President Greer.
Present.
Mr. Heidick.
Here.
Mrs. Thompson.
Here.
Mrs. Bailey.
Here.
Mrs. Angela. Ms. Mattson. Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mr. Jaber.
Here.
Mrs. Coburn.
Here.
Mrs. Scott.
Here.
Thank you, Clerk. Approval of the minutes. So we'll do approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, June 12th, 2023. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting from Monday, June 12th, 2023.
And Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to approve the minutes from Monday, June 12th, 2023.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on June 12th, 2023 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes are adopted. Finance report. Acceptance of the Finance Department report for the month of May 2023 as presented. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to accept the finance report for the month of May 2023 as presented.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion for acceptance of the finance report.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to accept the financial report for the month of May 2023 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the finance report is accepted. Petitions and claims.
We have none.
Matters requested.
They have all been dispersed.
Thank you. Citizens addressing council. We do have one citizen. When I state your name, please approach the podium, and state your name, address, and reason for speaking.
We have a patio?
Mrs. Everhart.
Good evening, my name is Megan Everhart and I live at 720 Mesa Verde Drive. And I just want to address council this evening as it's the third and final reading on ordinances 77, 78, and 79, 2023, which are the three parklands. I just want to say that one, I oppose the legislation as it's presented because there's no clear defined plans for the parks that are being proposed sold, and I encourage all of you to consider that as you make your decisions this evening. I would also like to propose that as representatives of council and of all the citizens of the community, we've heard very strongly from some citizens over the past month that have come here or have communicated with you about their desires for some of the parks, and that a collaboration be undertaken that I would fully support between the Parks Commission and council and the Planning Commission to do a comprehensive study of all of our parks. As it's been mentioned, our community has changed, and probably the most significantly over the past several years, on how citizens engage and utilize public spaces near where they live or work, and that we should look at all of our parks in their totality and work with the commission who oversees them on a day-to-day basis. And I think council should be involved as representatives of the citizens of these neighborhood parks to look at how they want to be utilized now and in the future, and gives a good guidance in a clear direction with a collaborative process so that you can make better decisions. The Parks Commission can make better decisions moving forward, investment and utilization. So I strongly encourage you to vote no this evening and join me in working on providing a collaborative approach to meeting our citizens' needs. As I stated earlier, I'll just pull out College Park in particular. We've heard very strongly that not only do they want the playground equipment back, but they want other potential uses, and the citizens that live near it are the ones that use it, and I don't see them engaged in this process. And I think that it's imperative that as representative of your particular wards and at large, that you be engaged and the citizens be engaged on the future direction, and work with the Parks Commission, as I stated, in implementing that plan as it comes before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Everett. There are no more citizens addressing council, so we will hop into first reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 84-2023, presented by Mrs. Fry. Title, enter into contract U.S. Royce Protection Service. An ordinance authorizing the Barberton Municipal Court to enter into contract with U.S. Royce Protective Service, formerly known as Tenable Protective, for a period of 1 year to provide unarmed uniformed security officers and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Griffin to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angelos is absent. Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 84-2023.
Thank you. And Mr. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. The motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Griffin to adopt ordinance number 84-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angelos?
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 85-2023, presented by Mrs. Coburn. Title, enter into contract CT Consultants Breckwood Package Plant Elimination Study. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a professional engineering services contract with CT Consultants for additional construction administration, construction inspection, and environmental assistance support services not to exceed $118,700 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Fry?
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion to suspend.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Fry to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Angela absent. Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 85-2023 be adopted.
Thank you. Mrs. Fry?
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Fry to adopt ordinance number 85-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela is absent. Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 86-2023 presented by Mrs. Coburn and Mr. Heidick. Title: Appropriation Utilities Departments. An ordinance appropriating $348,158.67 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the stormwater capital budget and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Councilor Coburn's motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela is absent. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 86-2023.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 86-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela is absent. Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 87-2023 presented by Mr. Heidick. Title: Appropriation Fire Department. An ordinance appropriating $4,753.59 from the unappropriated item of the general fund to the fire department's operation and maintenance budget of the general fund and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela is absent. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance 87-2023 be adopted.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second Mr. Heidick's motion for adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 87-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Mrs. Angeloff is absent. Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 88-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber and Mr. Hyder. Title, Appropriation Parks Department. An ordinance appropriating $2,593.08 from the unappropriated item of the beautification fund to the Parks Department's operation and maintenance fund budget and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Jaber.
Mr. President, I move the rules required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Councilor Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff is absent.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of ordinance number 88-2023.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 88-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff is absent.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
This ends the first readings.
Thank you. Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
We have none.
Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 77-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Purchase of Parkland. An ordinance to provide for an election in order to permit the sale by the city of Barberton, College Park, and for giving notice thereof. This is the third reading. The first reading was on Monday, May 22nd, 2023, and the second reading was on Monday, June 12th, 2023.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of ordinance number 77-2023.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 77-2023. Are there any remarks? All right. Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Thompson?
No.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
No.
Mrs. Frye?
No.
Mrs. Angeloff is absent. Mrs. Coburn?
No.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
Mrs. Bailey?
No.
Thank you. Motion for adoption fails.
Ordinance number 78-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Purchase of Parkland. An ordinance to provide for an election in order to permit the sale by the city of Barberton, Carter Park, and for giving notice thereof. This is the third reading. The first reading was on Monday, May 22nd, 2023, and the second reading was on Monday, June 12th, 2023.
Thank you. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of ordinance number 78-2023.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 78-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Angeloff is absent. Mr. Jaber?
No.
Mrs. Bailey?
No.
Mr. Griffin?
No.
Mrs. Coburn?
No.
Mrs. Frye?
No.
Mrs. Thompson?
No.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Motion for adoption failed.
Ordinance number 79-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Purchase of Parkland. An ordinance to provide for an election in order to permit the sale by the city of Barberton, Conrad Park, and for giving notice thereof. This is the third reading. The first reading was on Monday, May 22nd, 2023, and the second reading was on Monday, June 12th, 2023.
Thank you. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of ordinance number 79-2023.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 79-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin.
No.
Mrs. Angeloff is absent. Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
No.
Mrs. Fry.
No.
Mrs. Bailey.
No.
Mrs. Coburn.
No.
Mrs. Thompson.
No.
Thank you. Motion for adoption failed.
This ends the third reading.
Thank you. Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Is there any? Mr. Heidick?
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to excuse Councilor Angeloff for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. That was what I was going to have. So is there a second to excuse Mrs. Angela for tonight? Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to excuse Mrs. Angela for this evening.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to excuse Councilwoman Angela for today's meeting, June 26, 2023. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Mrs. Angeloff is excused. Is there anything from the body that they would like to say? Mrs. Fry?
I just wanted to remind everyone that we got a letter from First Energy this week, Amy Hopkins, and it is in regard to appliance recycling, that residents can call the electric company and have refrigerators, freezers, dehumidifiers, air conditioners, and several washers and dryers that aren't energy efficient. They can recycle them, and they are paid by Ohio Edison, and they will take those appliances away. Now, there are some ifs, ands, or buts with certain things, like you can't just call about a humidifier or a room air conditioner. It has to be in addition to a refrigerator, freezer, bigger items. And then there is, on the second page, it lists some of the other things and the requirements that go along with it. And I just wanted everyone to print that, so if they got any questions about it, they would be able to answer them.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. Is there anything else from the body?
Thank you, Mr. President. During my break, I got a text message from a person who's also had a concern about the VFW, and they were saying, why am I against the VFW? Again, I am not against the VFW. I just make sure that we follow the rules and guidelines through planning and Parks Commission. Again, wasn't a 2x2 sidewalk. This was a big pad that was put, and I know it was done over the weekend. I just don't want no other person to come in over the weekend and put their own pad in their own backyard, their own business without permission. Again, hope we can move forward with this and learn from our mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber. Is there anything else from the body? Anything? I have a couple things. First off, this weekend is the weekend prior to, but usually most people will be celebrating July 4th. So just be safe. The Summit County has put out the Alive program. Basically, it's a free ride up to $20. And from July 2nd to July 5th. So there's no reason for anybody to be drinking and driving if they consume any amount of alcohol. I believe we all got it in our packet, so if you could share that with everybody you could possibly share that with, hopefully it'll make the roads a little safer. Second thing is, it is the 4th of July weekend coming up, while the 4th is on Tuesday. I just want to wish everybody that is having a get-together, a festival, or anything, a happy and safe 4th of July weekend. And the last thing is, I don't make the rules, but the next meeting is July 3rd, so our long weekend is cut short, and that will be a committee of the whole. I do want to note that clerk of council will be out on vacation, which is no issue, so if you guys have any questions, you're working remotely, but she might not answer, so I will be taking her place, even if I have to sit in the office, if you need something. So I will be there, and I'll be running the meeting for July 3rd, 2023. And with nothing else from the body, is there anything from department heads you guys want to say? Communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Christmas in July has started early here with drop-off points in the mayor's office and the YMCA here Lake Anna, Langside. Other businesses are participating, collecting internally, without a public drop-off point. Non-perishables, the benefit of background and Salvation Army. So collecting all the way through the end of July. Jam the RV this past Friday was canceled, unfortunately, due to the weather. We'll be hosting again in July and August, and County President with another date as well during the Lake Anna Conference Series. Change for Change will be this Thursday, the 29th at Barberton's, benefiting the youth football and cheer programs, 4:30 to 7. When it comes to our parks, College Park specifically, we've been talking about, we've heard from a lot of residents from across the city who are not in favor of selling any parks. A lot of it is because there wasn't a plan. And I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Hyden, your explanation tonight. Just passing along what was communicated to us. Not only are we working on a plan for College Park, but also working on creating a safe atmosphere for the park and Snyder Avenue. The safety of children and pedestrians that was brought up with Snyder Avenue. So we're working for that, on that as well, accounting for pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, buses, etc. So I want to make sure that this is a full and complete plan of not only College Park, but Snyder Avenue as well. Obviously, the roof replacement project is moving forward, despite, in addition to the weather changes. I think it rained 5 different times today. So, but they're up there, they're doing everything they can as the weather allows. Also, improvements to the elevator here, so that should be hopefully fixed quickly. Today was the first day that they're working on that, so I appreciate everyone's patience with those two projects, in addition to all the road projects that are commencing. As I mentioned last week, I spent most of last week and this past weekend on the phone and sending out emails, talking to state legislators on both the House and the Senate side concerning the proposed state budget. So two of the main issues that we've been working on is, one is eliminating the ability of municipalities to tax stock options and deferred compensation payments. So we want to remove that ability, but those people with stock options and deferred comp would still pay the state level taxes and at the federal level. So it would just be eliminating income at the municipal level. It's been estimated that this would affect throughout the entire state of Ohio about roughly $12 to $14 million. So that's huge. The second thing is eliminating the ability for municipalities to charge a fee to landlords for rental units. Getting rid of the fee for rental registration. So whether it's Barberton, Akron, Cleveland, Pepper Pike, Beechwood, Euclid, most communities, all those communities I mentioned have a rental registration. It's used to keep track of rental units. We have more and more rental units that are owned by corporations that are out of the county, out of the city, out of state. An increase of rental units owned by people from other countries. So making sure that they're accountable and they're responsible for things like cutting grass, as I mentioned earlier, and other things, but also creating programs, inspection programs, lead abatement programs, rehab programs, things like that. What is those two things? How do those impact the state budget? And they don't affect the state budget, just municipalities? I don't know. So I did hear back from our Representative Bob Young today, and also Senator Goldman's office today. But as I'm sitting here during council, more news is coming out. The budget is supposed to be on the governor's desk by the 30th. I know they were working all weekend. And some of those amendments, the two I mentioned, and others are what's called conference right now. So it's being worked on by both sides of the aisle. So hopefully good information and good news by the end of the week. I'll keep you guys updated on that. I want to give you an update on the Barberton Community Improvement Corporation, the CIC. So there are 14 members. We have been meeting monthly. We're not meeting this month, lack of agenda items. I did receive $250,000 of ARPA funds through City Council. With that, we prepared information on 77 2nd Street Southwest, 8 acres in the building that we can work with the owner to market and bring in developers. Work with the foundation to is to abate the property at Bull Street and Norton Avenue. Purchased the former Dutch Cafe and the house next to it, abated both buildings and demoed both buildings. Those buildings sat on 5 parcels of various sizes. We just completed the sale of 2 of the parcels, so the 3 remaining parcels were in negotiations with companies to buy those. So, give you an update on that. So, that's all I have at this moment. Any questions? Jessica?
Whose decision was it to close down State Street? No, is it moving, I noticed that it wasn't closed today, when they said it was gonna be closed.
And I heard just a little bit ago that they turned one of the signs off on State Street going eastbound, I believe it was. So that's an ODOT-led project. They did drop off some storm inlets on Worcester Road North, on the east side of the street. So I'm not sure, I don't have with me my notes on the exact plan. And they may have just turned that off because of the holiday weekend coming up. But it's moving forward. And these things take time, and we're throwing a July 4th weekend, that's on a goofy Tuesday, as you mentioned, kind of speeds up things for a lot of people. So
Thank you. I just wanted to mention it. It's the talk of the town on that side of town.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Mr. President, I will second that motion.
Thank you. It's moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson that we adjourn. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Didn't think so. This